We took some of the weakest characters in Honkai Star Rail and tried to come up with ways to make them not only stronger, but also make their kits fit their theme better. Now you may be wondering why I'm making this video, and it's because A, I don't know how it happened, but apparently I'm a Honkai Star Rail YouTuber now, and B, I lost another 50-50 to Fraud King, so I thought this could be an interesting experiment in game balance. I highly doubt Hoyo will ever directly buff a character post-release, but in the off chance they do, these are what they'll hopefully look like. These changes aim to make the characters first and foremost more fun to play, but also more viable and versatile. Maybe they'll be ridiculously OP, or maybe somehow I made them worse. That will be for you to decide. So be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more HSR videos. I'm joined here by Univio, local HSR aficionado and definitely not whale, to discuss these changes. Say hello to the good people.
Hi everyone, glad to be here.
Let's get started. First, Yanqing. Yanqing is a character with a platitude of struggles, the least of which includes absolute reliance on 100% shield uptime, resulting in fairly rigid team building, extreme inconsistencies which give him little return in the best of scenarios, high SP consumption, needlessly high energy costs, and an extreme disadvantage in multi-target scenarios. His speed and hypercarry DPS nature also demand him to attack frequently, which makes shielding him even harder. Yanqing is one of the most frustrating characters to pilot as a result. While the single target downside is a weakness inherent to the Hunt class, minus a certain someone, the rest of his kit can be changed to be more intuitive, well-rounded, and hopefully can earn him at least one W in the story, but I doubt it.
I don't know, I got him and then I really tried to build him and use him, but it was just so not worth the resources.
Essentially, he got directly power crept by Jinglu, which can be expected for a limited character. However, it shouldn't be the case where he also does way less damage in single target scenarios. He's terrible. He sucks. He's so bad to play, and we are going to make him better, hopefully. So, the first thing we are going to change is his skill, Darting Iron Thorn. Buff. These are all going to be with the premise of they are fully maxed out, so deals ice damage equals to 220% of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy and activates Soul Steel Sync for 1 turn, which is very similar to the old one with one notable change. Deals ice damage equal to 240% of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy, and minus the Soul Steel Sync passive, which we will get to later. I think the last time I used a Yanqing skill, it did like 10k damage or something. It was pathetic. So we're gonna up the multiplier by a little bit. Ultimate, amidst the raining bliss. Shift. Old, increases Yanqing's crit rate by 60%. When Soul Steel Sync is active, increases Yanqing's crit damage by an extra 50% for 1 turn. Afterwards, deal ice damage equal to 350% of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy. So this is the one ability in Yanqing's kit that is kind of fine. It can chunk if all the circumstances are met. The thing is, they very rarely are. However, it's very hard to achieve. Because of that, we're not going to change the power of this attack so much. In fact, we're actually going to nerf it by a little bit, and we'll balance it out a little bit later. But the idea is that we hope to have his ultimate up more in the later changes to the kit, while keeping the sort of nuke aspect, which is kind of the one thing he has going. So, new ultimate increases Yanqing's crit rate by 50%. When Soul Steel Sync is active, increases Yanqing's crit damage by an extra 50% for 1 turn. Afterwards, deal ice damage equal to 350% unchanged of Yanqing's attack to a single enemy. New, the next time Yanqing attacks, he will perform a follow-up attack, which will have a 100% fixed chance to freeze the enemy. The goal of this is to reduce the RNG involved with this follow-up attack, which is one of the most frustrating things outside of the Soul Steel Sync. So now, after he ults, he's going to have a guarantee. So lessens the RNG, makes him more consistent damage output across the board. Moving on to the talent, One with the Sword buff, and this is going to be a pretty big buff. So the old, when Soul Steel Sync is active, Yanqing is less likely to be attacked by enemies. Yanqing's crit rate increases by 20% and his crit damage increases by 30%. After Yanqing attacks an enemy, there's a 60% chance to perform a follow-up attack, dealing ice damage equal to 50% of Yanqing's attack to the enemy, which has a 65% base chance to freeze the enemy for 1 turn. The frozen target cannot take action and receives additional ice damage equal to 50% of Yanqing's attack at the beginning of each turn. When Yanqing receives damage, the Soul Steel Sync will disappear. So this passive is really interesting in that in a lot of ways it feels like a nerf rather than something that adds to his kit, because The fact that you lose this buff so easily is atrocious to deal with. Even with characters like Gepard, even with characters like Aventurine, it is still so difficult to keep his passive up. And the follow-up attack is so weird, it's so inconsistent, and frankly, it's not even that strong when it does proc. The issue is, he needs so many stats that it doesn't, if you need to build effect hit rate on him to land the follow-up attack or to land the freeze, that's also pretty tough as well.
I agree, honestly. I don't think I've tried Yanqing with Aventurine specifically, but I feel like I've seen videos on it and he still can be quite inconsistent, so I think changing just like the mechanic will definitely make him better.
And change we will do. So, the new talents for Yanqing. If Yanqing is above 50% HP, activate Soul Steel Sync. When Soul Steel Sync is active, Yanqing is less likely to be attacked by enemies. Yanqing's crit rate increases by 30% now, up from 20% previously, and his crit damage increases by 30%. After Yanqing attacks an enemy, there is a 60% fixed chance to perform a follow-up attack, dealing ice damage equal to 60%, up from 50%, of Yanqing's attack to the enemy, which has a 65% base chance to freeze the enemy for 1 turn. The frozen target cannot take action and receives additional ice damage equal to 60%, up from 50%, of Yanqing's attack at the beginning of each turn. And now Soul Steel Sync deactivates if Yanqing is below 50%. So we finally don't need to run a shielder for Yanqing. It is a remarkable feat. He now actually has other sustain options.
I mean, I think one of the biggest draws to him is that you kind of have to run him with the shielder, or else he just doesn't follow up attack. Everything is inconsistent, and then he doesn't do damage when he doesn't also follow up attack, and it's just a pain to use him.
Yep, this opens up a lot of new opportunities, reduces a lot of the pain points when using him, and I think is a lot more interesting mechanic than just if you get hit, you don't do damage anymore. Now it's sort of similar to Blade's mechanic where you have to balance his HP, and that affects his strength and how much damage he's doing, while also making the margin of error a lot larger and not 0 like it was before. And the next changes to his Ascensions and Eidolons will further increase the overall effectiveness and consistency of our king. So Ascension 4, Frost favors the bold. Buff. Old. When Soul Steel Sync is active, effect rest increases by 20%. This effectively was useless, because if Yanqing is getting attacked and he's getting CC'd, you got bigger problems. And while it sucks to get CC'd for sure, the odds of that happening are pretty low. I think that he'd be much better off with something new, or rather something changed from his Eidolons. So the new Ascension 4 will be, when Soul Steel Sync is active, energy regeneration rate is increased by an extra 10%. This is his E2 that is now being added to base kit. He will have more ultimate uptime, which also means more follow-up attacks, because now after he ults, he will have a guaranteed follow-up attack and a guaranteed freeze. This is very nice. He will be feeling a lot better now.
Just an energy regen change coupled with the kind of inconsistencies that have been fixed with him not being able to follow up attack will really open up a lot of possibilities, because I could see you using Tingyun and just kind of making him into sort of like an ulti bot, and just in general doing a lot more consistent damage that way.
Yeah, opens up a lot of new opportunities and really making the existing ones a lot stronger as well. Moving on to his Eidolon 2's Supine? I don't know. Serenade. Shift. So, as you saw before, this is the E2, which is being added to his base kit, so we're going to give him something new with the new one. So, old. When Soul Steel Sync is active, energy regeneration rate increases by an extra 10%. New. When Yanqing freezes an enemy, Yanqing regenerates 10 energy and heals for 10% max HP. This makes balancing Soul Steel Sync a lot easier for Yanqing. In the off chance that he gets absolutely nuked, we didn't want him to essentially be locked out of his passive for good if you're not running a dedicated healer. His whole thing is freezing, his whole thing is follow-up attacking. Now he can sort of snowball this effect where he's going to be having a lot more ults, which means a lot more follow-up attacks, a lot more consistency, and now he has that a little bit more of a safety net so that he can return his passive if he drops below 50%. The aim of this is to make him, again, a lot more consistent. He's not so reliant on RNG, and he's not just completely doomed if he gets focused by an enemy. This should be feeling a lot better for him.
Honestly, yeah, I agree. I think before, his E2 really didn't feel like an E2, especially considering the characters that we have now that have obviously power crept the older characters. But their kind of Eidolon 2s really do feel like a change to the character, and I think that shifting Yanqing's E2 to what it is now really makes him feel like more like a character than he was before.
All in all, these changes to Yanqing makes him more consistent across the board, removing requirements to run him with a dedicated shielder and having a greater follow-up attack, freeze, and ultimate uptime. Additionally, Yanqing will no longer be required to use skill every turn. Will this open up a route for the elusive Yanqing sub DPS? No. But in the odd case where Yanqing is left without a skill point on his turn, his DPS won't plummet as a result. All in all, our king will be more well-rounded and less RNG reliant, opening up more teams and scenarios where he can excel. Let's sort of talk about new playstyles, new team comps, what these changes mean for Yanqing. I think the sort of current best in slot team, which is basically Yanqing, Aventurine, and then some combination of Pella, Ranmei, Tingyun, Bronya, I think becomes a lot better for him. I think specifically Tingyun's energy regen will serve him quite well. He'll be a lot more well-rounded, but also now there are some new comps that you can do, like running him with Fushuan to increase his crit rate. Also, it means that he's much less likely to fall below the threshold for Soul Steel Sync because of the extra damage mitigation that Fushuan provides. Especially with her E1, giving the increased crit damage as well is also going to be very nice. Additionally, Huohuo now becomes a very valid and possible sustain for him, further increasing his ultimate uptime. Basically, before his big issue, or one of his many big issues rather, with energy regeneration rate will be a lot more manageable now that he has all these new different setups.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a DPS be kind of locked to a certain path of sustain is a little outdated in my opinion, but definitely him being able to be accompanied with abundance characters will be a really big shift for him.
What do you think of perchance Yanqing Jinglu comp? You know, run a little Huohuo, run a little Robin, you know? Could slam.
I could see it with the more consistent freeze. I definitely think that's a possibility.
What do you think? Is he OP now? Is he just kind of still whatever?
Honestly, I don't know. I think we'd have to see these changes in action, but I do think that the freeze and the energy regen might be pretty goated. But Hoyo, if you're listening, please help him.
Bro needs so much help. I mean, okay, so first off, power-wise, he is without a doubt like multiple magnitudes better. However, he is still just a single target bot. So running him in MOC is not going to be like, I think that with this new version, he's not going to be like tearing through like triple enemy scenarios like Jinglu will, but I think he does have his niche now, or at least I hope so. So yeah, those are the Yanqing changes. Now we can move on to probably the worst character in the game, Arlan.
I don't think you should call him the worst character in the game.
Who's worse than Arlan?
You're kind of putting me on the spot here.
There you go.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
All right, well, let's talk about Arlan. So Arlan sucks. His kit is probably the most poorly designed one in Star Rail, with each aspect inexplicably making him worse. Shout out to Redditor Returning Old Master for basically summarizing all of his weaknesses that make it a lot more clear. Short of it is that his traces give him more HP while his skill makes HP worse. His class's aggro chance makes him need a healer, while his Eidolons make him want to be at low HP all the time. His HP consumption is functionally useless, with the HP set's bonus HP being irrelevant due to him being a pure attack scaler. His Ascension traces are also useless. The only positive to him is not consuming skill points, so you'd probably want to run him with supports like Bronya and Asta to make him attack more frequently. Except for the fact that him doing so makes him more likely to die with him losing all his HP. So yeah, Arlan sucks. Our changes will hopefully make his kit less counterintuitive and lean into the either sub DPS playstyle or the action advance go very frequently playstyle, while also staying true to his original design and high risk, high reward playstyle. So Arlan, have you ever used Arlan before?
No, and I think I actually took a quiz, like a Honkai Star Rail quiz recently, and I completely forgot that he existed. So that was a little embarrassing.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like a lot of characters get power crept with like the release of like characters down the line, but I think Arlan's the first character who was just terrible at launch. He was good in the beta, and then they nerfed him to smithereens, which is a darn shame.
Beta?
Yeah, his scaling is actually quite good. However, the kit was still weird and had bad synergy, but his numbers were good. They take that away from him, and he's just terrible. But he was absolutely a menace in beta. I think even if they released him in that state, he'd still be fine. I don't think he would have been ridiculously OP. So let's make him ridiculously OP. Or, well, I think he'll be a very, very much more, at the very least, a much more interesting character now. So, shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Skill, Shackle Breaker. First of all, we're changing this to something else. We're gonna call this Unyielding Will, because I don't see any shackles on him, and I feel like the sort of subtext for that is a little weird. Shackle Breaker now is Unyielding Will. Old consumes Arlan's HP equal to 15% of his max HP to deal lightning damage equal to 240% of Arlan's attack to a single enemy. If Arlan does not have sufficient HP, his HP will be reduced to 1 after using his skill. New consumes Arlan's HP equal to 15% of his max HP to deal lightning damage equal to 260%, up from 240 of Arlan's attack to a single enemy. Yada yada yada. So nice little scaling buff there, which will further increase his damage as we go into the rest of his kit. So, Ultimate, Frenzied Punishment, buff. Old, deals lightning damage equal to 320% of Arlan's attack to a single enemy and lightning damage equal to 160% of Arlan's attack to enemies adjacent to it. New, consumes Arlan's HP equal to 15% of his current HP to deal lightning damage equal to 340% of Arlan's attack to a single enemy and lightning damage equal to 180% of Arlan's attack to enemies adjacent to it. So now, Arlan will not just die whenever he skills, because it's now scaling off his current HP, so it's not going to be as big of a hit the lower HP you go. More survivability while also packing a much greater punch. Frankly, 320% for an ultimate is pretty sad. So 340%, it buffs him up a little bit.
I'm reading these skills, or I'm listening to you read about them, and I have just realized I have no clue what Arlan does. And so, but I think that a change to the amount of HP he consumes will definitely make him less, because I feel like he's almost more suicidal to play than Blade is. Like, he just wants to lose all his HP. And so I think it'll be definitely better for him.
Yeah, the problem is, unlike Blade, he has no way of getting the HP back.
Yeah.
And he dies as a result. Let's make him not die. With the talent rework. First of all, we're changing Pain and Anger to Limit Break, because, I don't know, it just seems very edgy. It seemed like very kind of uninspired and edgy. So, it's now Limit Break. Buff. Definitely a huge buff. Old increases Arlan's damage for every percent of HP below his max HP up to a maximum of 72% more damage. New increases Arlan's damage for every percent of HP below his max HP up to a max of 80% more damage. And this is the one that I thought of that I think would make Arlan a really, really interesting character. Arlan cannot receive healing. Instead, 60% of healing received by Arlan is converted to a special shield. The shield effect cannot exceed 40% of Arlan's max HP. This effect can stack with other shields. So, this does a lot of really interesting things for Arlan. First of all, it gives him a level of safety innate to himself outside of having a dedicated shielder, which he absolutely needs. B, it also makes his max HP an important stat, whereas before it was functionally useless despite his traces giving him more HP, because he loses it all when he skills. And it's also based off his max HP originally, so now it's going to be off of his current HP, and having more HP essentially gives him more survivability in the sense that his shield is going to be a lot bigger when he has a larger HP pool.
Actually really interesting. I think making it so that he can't be healed will definitely encourage people to want to play him with multiple supports, and honestly I could imagine maybe the Ron May Robin Sparkle playstyle perhaps working for him.
It's also quite fitting for his character lore-wise, because his whole thing is about like self-sacrifice and putting others first. So him not receiving healing and instead kind of using that to direct it to his enemies is a really interesting concept. It is also going to be further improved with the upcoming changes to his ascensions and his eidolons. So let's talk about the first ascension change, which is revival shift. Old. If the current HP percentage is 30% or lower when defeating an enemy, immediately restores HP equal to 20% of his max HP. So this was really his only way of surviving, and it's kind of whatever. And it's also a little bit counterintuitive because in theory he wants to be at low HP anyways. So it's a very odd sort of trace, and it's also 20% of his max HP isn't all that much anyways. So it sort of is this very weak safety blanket that also makes his damage worse in a sort of indirect way. It was very awkward, and now it's going to hopefully flow a lot better. So the new Ascension 2 Revival. If the current HP percentage is 40% or lower when defeating an enemy, increase Arlan's crit damage by 15% for 2 turns. So this is going to lean further into the whole glass cannon archetype. He's going to be dealing a lot more damage when he's at low HP, and this is his one and only source of, well, crit related anything in his kit directly.
I think it's really interesting. As I'm like listening to what his old Ascension 2 was, it kind of feels like he was a precursor to Blade, and that they were kind of, I guess, like designing a character that would have a similar playstyle, but they just like hadn't refined him yet. Because Blade is a character that, like, obviously he likes consuming HP, but unless I'm remembering wrong, I don't think he does more damage when he's at lower HP. He just really likes consuming HP. And so I think that definitely changing that for Arlan will make him like more viable.
Yeah, I know Soyu has this like sort of thing that they do where they'll sort of introduce like a type of character as a non-limited one to kind of test the waters, and then the limited one will just basically be that but a lot more fleshed out. So you have like Arlan Blade, they have Jue Yi with Boot Hills, sort of taking the unique mechanic and really improving upon it. Even like Sampo Kafka, where Sampo was like this dot dealer who also had like a sort of this detonation in his kit, or at least in his eidolons, and now with Kafka, her whole kit's being essentially dot detonation. They do that a lot, and unfortunately it leaves a lot of characters sort of picking up the scraps. Now Arlan will be feeling a lot better. So let's move on to his Ascension 4 Endurance. Old, the chance to resist dot debuffs increases by 50%. New, the max shield effect of the talent increases by an additional 10% of his maximum health, and the healing to shield and conversion rate further increases by an additional 10%. So, his old A4 is completely terrible.
Yeah, I don't really know why they felt the need to include that. It really just seems quite useless.
It's so weird. It's like this weird niche thing that also doesn't, like, you will never notice that when you're actually like fighting.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless they had planned to kind of like give him this resist because they anticipated him dying because of the mechanic that they had implemented where he like consumes all of his HP. I don't really know what they were thinking with this one.
They were not cooking. But the new A4 will be increasing his HP effectiveness of the shield by quite a lot. So now it'll be 70% of healing being converted to shield, and the shield can be up to 50% of Arlan's max HP. With all of his HP traces and potentially his new best in slot relic set, which we'll get into later, this will actually provide him a decent amount of safety, while also him still being very high risk, high reward, with him being at very low HP throughout most of the battle. I also think it kind of makes more sense for like the name Endurance, because like the dot debuff resist doesn't really scream endurance to me, but now it'll be more directly making him tankier. Speaking of fitting better, hopefully, his A6 repel. This is going to definitely be a bit of a rework, but definitely a buff in the sum. So old, upon entering battle, if Arlan's HP is less than or equal to 50%, he can nullify all damage received except for dot until after he is attacked. New, while Arlan has a shield, increases damage res of all allies by 8%. So this was a very, very weird ascension, because it only mattered for overworld content, as you can't enter battle below 50% in MOC or really any end game mode. And he can nullify all damage received except for dot until after he is attacked. He essentially nullifies a single hit. It's like that really terrible Curio in Simulated Universe. And when you're running him with a shielder, which you should be, then he'll always have a shield at the start of the match anyways. So I don't know what they were cooking with his original A6, but nothing good.
No, I honestly, yeah, I don't know. I think it would have made sense if he had a technique that consumed his HP to have him below 50%. But even then, it kind of seems like a bit of a stretch. And yeah, I mean, I said it before, but I really don't know what they were thinking.
Now, with his new A6, it sort of leans into his character role of a protector. You know, he is the head of security, he's putting others before himself, so now he will be literally protecting others in his presence, so providing a little bit of team utility and increasing the damage res. I think this really helps him out just in really any team comp, but it also just fits quite well with his character, which I like.
Yeah, I also think it just his, I guess, like ability to create a shield mechanic really screams the destruction path in Simulated Universe, where it consumes your HP and it turns it into a shield. So I think it'll make him a really interesting character to play.
Indeed. And our last changes to his Arlan A4 turn the tables. Shift. Old. When struck by a killing blow after entering battle, instead of becoming knocked down, Arlan immediately restores his HP to 25% of his max HP. This effect is automatically removed after it is triggered once or after 2 turns have elapsed. New. When struck by a killing blow after entering battle, instead of becoming knocked down, Arlan immediately gains a shield equivalent to the max effect of his talent. This effect is automatically removed after it is triggered twice. So, his old E4 was an interesting idea, except for the one thing that also makes it useless, which is after 2 turns have elapsed. So, you are either dying in the first 2 turns of battle, or this E4 is useless, which is pretty hilarious to think about.
Yeah, honestly, like, did they not want us to use Arlan with a sustain? Like, was that the intention?
Yeah, I guess the idea was that if you're doing strictly overworld content and you don't think to go to any of the anchors or use any of the consumables to heal yourself, and you enter battle at 1 HP for some reason and you die, now he'll be back up. So functionally useless in all the relevant content, and not even that good in weird overworld cases. Now it provides him an actual revive, and without the added unnecessary conditional of it being within the first 2 turns, and now he gets it twice. So, a lot more safety and a lot more sense, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah.
So, now Arlan has a kit with proper synergy that also introduces a unique healing to shielding mechanic. His HP traces now actually serve an important purpose in increasing his survivability through shielding, and also opening up the Longevous Disciple as a new best in slot, and Blade's Lycone providing him a massive buff. This also allows for a new team composition with him that can utilize either Abundance or Preservation characters for sustain without compromising his effectiveness. With these changes, Arlan finally becomes much less glass and a much more cannon. So, healing to shielding mechanic, what do you think of that?
I think it's really interesting. I don't think any other characters really have a mechanic like this, and honestly, considering that we'd seen it in Simulated Universe, I was hoping that they would eventually make a character who kind of functions like that, because just consuming the HP and basically turning it into a shield is a really cool concept. It makes it so that characters can rely less on sustain units and kind of be used with more damage boosting supports. So I think this opens up a lot of new possibilities for him.
So previously, his best in slot team, I guess you can call it, for Arlan Hypercarry is Arlan, Aventurine, Tingyun, Ranmei maybe, or like a Branya in there or something. And the idea is just kind of, well, first of all, why would you ever run Arlan in any team? But B, just really, really, really hope your shield will never lose. But you can't really run him hyperspeed either, because similar to Yanqing, like the shield will, like the buff will wear off. So it sucked. And he had no real good comps. Now I could see Ho-Ho being extremely good for him, with Arlan not consuming skill points. Ho-Ho being a little bit more skill point hungry, definitely a lot more easy to deal with. And now you can do maybe something like Arlan Branya or Arlan Sparkle. Luocha could also be really good for him with the amount of healing that he gives. And another really interesting thing now is that Luocha will always be activating his emergency skill on him, which will always be giving him shielding because he'll be lower than 50% HP, and the emergency skill won't actually increase that. So similar to Blade's ultimate, where that automatically procs Luocha's heal, whenever it's available, it'll essentially always go to Arlan. So his shield will always be quite strong, and Luocha's field uptime will also be very, very good as well. Granted, this provides a little bit of danger to the rest of his team, but I think this could be a really interesting playstyle where you're essentially just dumping all of the healing into Arlan so that his shield is just massive, while also dealing a huge amount of damage while being at very low HP. So I think that this opens up a ton of new comps. I think, of course, Arlan sub DPS will continue to still be good. Granted, there aren't really any good comps with Arlan sub DPS right now, so maybe if you want to run him with like a Jingyuan somehow, maybe like a Ho-Ho Jingyuan Arlan kind of shenanigans could be interesting. But I think there's a lot of new things that this potential Arlan kit could do, and I just really think that the shielding stuff's quite interesting.
Definitely agree. I hope that obviously they're not going to change Arlan, but I hope in the future we see another character that might employ this HP to shielding mechanic, because it honestly sounds like a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, I think Blade's Lycone will actually be very, very strong on him, as well as Blade's Relic set, because of the HP percentage now serving a real important purpose. And speaking of Blade, we are going into the next character, Blade. Currently, Blade is considered by many to be one of the weakest limited 5-star characters in the game. This can mostly be attributed to his lack of dedicated supports, which makes use of his HP consumption mechanic, but his scalings are frankly pitiable when compared to the other top DPSs as well. While Blade will hopefully be buffed with the introduction of an HP scaling support characters down the line, there are a few adjustments that can be applied to Blade directly to make him a more solid DPS across the board. I have a toxic relationship with Blade. I have his S1. He is one of my... Before Firefly, he was my most heavily invested character. I liked him because he said funny lines that I thought were funny, and I said them in a funny voice. And he is so bad. He does nothing. He is outclassed by all of the top DPS. He does not have a single niche. He's probably the only character that wasn't like a top tier pick when he was released, and he has only gotten worse since then. There frankly just isn't very much content, if there is any at all, in which Blade is better than any of the other characters, which is quite tragic because I like Blade and he's fun to play as.
The only thing I could imagine Blade would be quite fun for is simulated universe solo runs.
Those are bangers. I like those videos.
Yeah, I really enjoy watching Blade solo everything, but unfortunately, as it stands, he can't really solo anything besides simulated universe. So maybe they'll fix him one day like they did with Jingyuan. Please.
So there's a couple of playstyles that Blade has. They're all bad, but there are a few sort of team comps that have Blade in them. So the first is what's known as the Unlimited Blade Works team, which is some sustain, typically Luocha, Blade, Bronya, and Sparkle. And you run Sparkle at 161 or 160 speed. Then Bronya at also like very high speed, like 150, 160. And Blade at 0 speed. You just continuously action advance Blade forward, and he's constantly going, constantly proccing his follow-up attack. It's quite fun, but still not good at all, at least compared to a lot of the other top tier team comps. You also have Blade Jade now and Blade Jinglu with the whole HP stealing, which is kind of neat, but still like you're better off running Jinglu with just a full team dedicated to her, and Jade is a funny character. So neither of those comps are really good either. My boy is struggling. He has no place in the meta currently. And there are talks of like, hey, what if they release sort of like an HSR version of Farina with the HP, with the buffs based on HP consumption, and that would be cool. However, he needs changes now because he is not good now, and I think there's a few interesting things that could be done to his kit that'll make him a lot more fun to play. So let's get into these changes. With the first change, the skill Hellscape. Old consumes HP equal to 30% of Blade's max HP to enter the... This is a long text box. So 30% of Blade's max HP to enter Hellscape state. When Hellscape is active, skill cannot be used. Damage dealt increases by 40%, and its basic attack Shard Sword, I didn't know that was what it was called, Shard Sword, is enhanced to Forest of Swords for 3 turns. If Blade's current HP is insufficient, his HP reduced to 1. His skill does not regenerate energy. Using the skill does not end the current turn. New. Well, everything I just said, except for now it's 50% damage dealt increase, so an extra 10%. This should translate to more damage. Not the most interesting change, but he needs it. So let's talk about an actually unique thing. The buff 2 is enhanced basic attack Forest of Swords. Old consumes HP equal to 10% of Blade's max HP and deals wind damage equal to the sum of 40% of his attack and 100% of his max HP to a single enemy. In addition, deals wind damage equal to a sum of 16% of Blade's attack and 40% of his max HP to adjacent targets. If Blade's current HP is insufficient, his HP will reduce to 1. For swords will not regenerate skill points. So the buff that this is getting is, if fewer than 3 enemies are attacked with Forest of Swords, increases Blade's max HP by 10%, lasting for 2 turns. This covers one of Blade's main struggles, which is whenever content is not blast 3 targets. Granted, this is, in MOC at least, the most common scenario. However, his DPS falls off of a cliff when there are not 3 enemies to attack with his enhanced basic. Now, this covers a little bit of that weakness. He still very much likes blast content. he still very much is not quite as strong in single target compared to a lot of other characters. However, this softens up that blow quite a bit.
I think it's really interesting that like other characters that come out after Blade can, even as multi-target damage dealers, can do just as much damage to single target units, whereas he doesn't get the same treatment. So I think changing his enhanced basic will really help him a lot in terms of dealing with those situations.
Moving on to his talent, Shuhu's Gift. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Buff. Old. When Blade sustains damage or consumes his HP, he gains 1 stack of charge, stacking up to 5 times. A max of 1 charge stack can be gained every time he is attacked. When charge stack reaches maximum, immediately launches a follow-up attack on all enemies, dealing wind damage equal to 44% of Blade's attack, plus 110% of his max HP. At the same time, restores Blade's HP by 25% of his max HP. After the follow-up attack, all charges are consumed. New. When Blade receives damage or consumes his HP, he gains 1 stack of charge, stacking up to 5 times. Additional stacks will be carried over if the number of stacks exceed the maximum. A max of 1 charge stack can be gained every time he's attacked. So, this does 2 things that are really important. 1, now he will no longer be punished if he gets a shield. So, for example, in Argenti's fight, right? If you break his... I don't even know what he called those things that he summons, but if Blade kills one of those, he gets a shield. And this shield absolutely tanks his DPS for a very weird reason, since he's not taking damage anymore. The shield's taking damage, so enemies attacking him don't increase his talent charges. This is extraordinarily frustrating, because you're essentially being punished for a buff that you didn't even ask for, that you just got. Being punished for a buff sucks. So now he will actually be gaining stacks if he's attacked with a shield. He still absolutely wants an abundance sustained character, but it's less punishing should he run a shielder or should a shield just be given to him in battle. The other thing with the stack overflow is something that really should have been included with both him and Himiko, where with new characters now, for example, like Jade, if you exceed the number of stacks, it'll just be carried over to the next cycle. Blade does not get that. There are some fringe cases where basically currently it's only like when on a team with Jade and Blade is the debt collector. I noticed since I have both Jade and Blade, usually when you'd attack with Blade as a debt collector, he'd get 2 stacks, but if he's at 4, then you're kind of losing value of one of those stacks. Now he will no longer do that, and it will be feeling a lot better, because it never feels good to lose out on value over this arbitrary stack rule.
Honestly, yeah, I think it's kind of cool that Jade has that mechanic now, and I think that definitely the devs should have considered giving Blade and Himiko this treatment as well. And yeah, I feel like this is just a much needed change. Honestly, I thought that that would have just been the case on his release, but it doesn't seem like it was. So I think this is a much needed change for him.
Yep. And the other buff to his talent is now it'll be healing him for 35% of his max HP. So I think the HP restoration and modification is a really fun and interesting part of his kit. But his talent was not healing as much as I think it really should have. With this, it's a lot less difficult to sustain him when you don't have characters like Luocha. Still, Luocha is quite good with Blade, of course, but this makes it a lot less tenuous. So, moving on to his A4, Never Ending Deaths. Talk about edgy. Buff. Old. If Blade hits a weakness broken enemy after using Force of Swords, he will restore HP equal to 5% of his max HP plus 100. New. If Blade defeats an enemy, ignore 4% defense, stacking up to 3 times and lasting for 2 turns. So when I hear the words Never Ending Deaths, I think first of all, you're a middle schooler. Second of all, you should probably be killing people a lot, and that should probably give you a buff. The old weakness break, healing him extra, I guess is kind of nice. I didn't even really know, despite playing Blade a lot, and investing him in heavily, I didn't even know that that's what his A4 did. And I don't really think it benefits him all that much. I mean, it's nice, sure, but what he really needs is damage. I think survivability for him is a much lower priority than dealing damage, especially as a sort of berserker archetype. So now, his whole thing is that as he defeats more enemies, he'll be getting stronger and stronger. I imagine like the Mara in him getting more out of control and him going into a frenzy. Something like that I think fits more thematically than just healing more against weakness broken enemies. Weakness break isn't really his thing anyways, so kind of weird that they made that a part of his kit. And I think this fits him better now.
Yeah, I think definitely other destruction characters do all have some sort of defense shredding mechanism, whether it be like gated behind an Eidolon or even just in their kit. I know with Firefly, and I think for Yanqing IL it would be locked behind his E2. I'm not sure if Jinglu has defense shred mechanisms, but I feel like yeah, so definitely there's defense shred is like a very common characteristic of destruction characters, but seem to have been left out for Blade. I think it definitely would help him do more damage.
And our last change is to his A6 Cyclone of Destruction buff. Damage dealt by Talent's follow-up attack increases by 20%. New. Damage dealt by Talent's follow-up attack increases by 20%. After unleashing Talent's follow-up attack, Blade's next action will be advanced forward by 15%. So, Cyclone of Destruction. I think it fits more thematically with the idea of just like this constant chaos, this like rampant attacks, and I think with his follow-up attacks advancing his action, it leans a lot more into his character. It means that he'll be obviously dealing more damage directly, but also draining more of his health. And I think this talent change makes it a lot more interesting. Really, like, I think just adding a new sort of element to the follow-up attack is just like an interesting kind of change.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it is very in line with the name. Essentially, like, as he's attacking, like, he just keeps getting faster and, like, it allows him to attack a lot more, which I think will definitely help in terms of more consistent damage and just higher numbers in general.
So these buffs lean further into Blade's Berserker archetype. The defense ignore in his A4 trace makes him a much more appealing pick, especially in pure fiction. Additionally, the changes to Blade's talent means he'll be far more versatile, and he'll further excel in content against dot enemies and on teams with Jade. So, now Blade will actually, in my opinion, be a contender for a high to top tier DPS.
I think so too.
With that in mind, we are going to move to Jade, who we have been talking about a little bit as well. So Jade, poor Jade, man. Just not only does she have to appear after Firefly's banner, but she also is terrible.
Really, honestly, just a bit of an overlooked character, I would say. I think for a lot of people, it was good news hearing that Jade was in the second half because it was just easy skip. And honestly, I feel bad. I really do love Jade's character design and just like her lore, but I think her kit is very underwhelming compared to like what it could have been. And yeah.
Funny story about Jade. I just threw a 10 pull in for fun, and I got Jade. And then I'm like, well, I know Jade isn't a character at E0, at least outside of pure fiction. So I'm like, well, I guess I gotta get her E1, and I did, and now she's an actual character. But still, not even that good of a character. Like, I would say that E1 Jade is about in line with other E0 characters, but she's still not that good in MOC, or really any content that isn't pure fiction. So I have a very obvious change in mind. And, you know, I am not going to read all of that because I'll just put it on screen. It's a lot of words, but the short version is her E1 is now base kit. I moved her E1 to her talent. Now she'll actually be a character in MOC who's halfway decent, and people who pull for Jade and stop at E0 will have a usable character outside of pure fiction.
Much needed. Help
Much
her,
needed.
save her.
Save her indeed. Now that leaves a space open for a new E1. So the old E1, for those of you who don't know, is altruism, nevertheless tradable. This is going to be a shift. So the old one is the follow-up attack damage from Jade's talent increases by 32% after the character with Debt Collector state uses an attack and hits 2/1 enemy targets. Jade additionally gains 1/2 points of charge. So actually, I feel like I should explain, like, at least to like a certain degree, what Jade's talent is and why E1 is so important. So essentially, her skill marks an ally. When the ally hits enemies, she gains a stack of her talent. I believe it's 8 stacks to unleash a follow-up attack. This means that the more targets an ally hits, the more stacks and the more follow-up she'll do. Which also means if the Debt Collector is only hitting one target, you are gaining a minimal amount of stacks, and she will not be follow-up attacking at all. So there are only a few viable targets for Debt Collector at E0. So like Herta, Himiko, Blade sometimes can be okay. You're not getting a lot of stacks if you're not hitting at least 3 enemies. With the E1, you're getting at least 3 stacks regardless, which absolutely should have been base kit. She is not strong enough at E0 to be worthwhile investment at all, in my opinion. Now with the E1 being shifted to base kit, the new E1 will be, if Jade's attack hits only one enemy, the attack will deal an additional set amount of damage equal to 40% of the original damage for the attacked enemy target. If this sounded sort of familiar, that's because it is. This is one of the erudition blessings in Simulated Universe, where you are dealing a set amount of what would have been AoE damage to a single target. So if you got into a fight with, let's say it's only one enemy in Simulated Universe, and you're just fully invested in erudition, without this blessing you would not be doing a lot of damage, right? Now we move this to Jade's kit, and her whole thing is dealing AoE attacks, her basics AoE no matter what, her talents AoE, her ults AoE. Now you'll be taking a lot of that lost damage and giving it back to her by a little bit. 40% is quite a decent amount that you're going to be retaining. And now she'll be kind of alright in 2 or 1 target scenarios.
Yeah, I think allowing her to kind of be used in single target scenarios will definitely make her more viable outside of pure fiction, because every other game mode is oriented in some way to doing lots of single target damage, and so this will be a really good boost to her overall damage.
I didn't really want to touch Jade's strength in pure fiction because she is the undisputed queen of pure fiction. Like, she's insanely strong in that. I'm sure future pure fictions will be balanced around the inclusion of Jade because she is probably the best character in pure fiction now. Her and Herta make an insane team, and increasing the damage output of her in pure fiction will just kind of break the game mode. I did want to balance out her overall weakness in modes that aren't pure fiction. Probably not better than the existing options in these other game modes, but she'll still be useful at least. With this simple change, Jade is no longer confined to the pure fiction cells and can perform sorta okay in MOC and Apocalyptic Shadow. Well, these are changes. I think that these have been fairly successful reworks, but I'm interested in what you all have to say, so let us know in the comments what you think of them, and thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.
So please consider subscribing for more Star Rail contents. We've done a lot of videos together, actually. We've done a lot of voiceover stuff. You can find those all on the channel. There will be a link in the description to the HSR playlist. Please watch those. Those are a lot of fun. They're quite cute, I think, and we love Star Rail.
I love Firefly. But yes, also Star Rail.
Indeed. Keep an eye out for our next video, which will be on Honkai Star Rail ships. Not like the Lofu ships, but like, you know, like the ones where they like hold hands and kiss and stuff. We'll be doing that one together as well. So, thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Bye bye. See ya.
Bye bye.
Anyway, $4 a pound.